I'm so happy to be here having the conversation. I think that the very first thing is to have the conversations, to mostly just to not be afraid of having the conversations. And when you're having conversations and then the fear comes up because someone is reacting or responding, and then you shut down, then nothing happens. So I would love to understand how to have better conversations that really help people speak up and ask their questions, and and get that going. So I'm happy that you set this up.
No, awesome. And Deborah, maybe you can actually start by defining those audiences and giving us the proper terminologies to use to identify those audiences.
Happy to. Well, the first thing that I think it's important for everyone to understand is what the definition of diversity actually is. And diversity is all the ways that we are similar and all the ways that we are different. However, the differences matter. And they particularly matter to the people who are a part of the group that you would look at as different, and yet you may not even recognize that those differences exist. And that's what creates the disconnect between people when something is being honored and held in a precious way, and it's not recognized as something that's important to the person on the other side. So one of the most important things that we have to learn to do is to honor the dimensions of diversity of every human being, and to honor and respect the humanity in all people. When we are authentically connecting, we are connecting in ways where we are looking at people and we are seeing them, meaning we are seeing all of them. And sometimes we'll make these little mistakes by saying that we're either colorblind or it doesn't make any difference to me whether you're gay or not. It's these statements that we make in order to make ourselves comfortable that end up actually making other people uncomfortable. So, right now, some of the terminology that we're looking at is BIPOC. Many of you may have seen that out there. And BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So you have people who identify as Black, which might be African American or African or anywhere in the world where people identify themselves as Black. Indigenous is people who are the indigenous people of the earth. We find indigenous people here in the United States among our Native Americans. We find indigenous people in Canada. We find them in Australia. Wherever they are, people who are the natives of the earth, the people who were here first. And then people of color, that spans the spectrum of anyone who does not identify as white. So your Asians, your people who come from any part of Latin America or Mexico, people who identify as people of color from the different parts of the earth. And in addition to the sort of racial categories, and something that I'd really like to share with all of you is there is really only one race, and it's called human. However, we all operate under this sort of illusion that's been created of a social construct of race. Race, as we know it with its categories, is man-made. It's not something that is true or verifiable based on, if you look at our DNA, we are 99.9999% the same. However, socially, it's been constructed that we have races, but there's really one, and it's called human. And unless you're from another planet, excuse me, and some of us may be, you look at the reality that many of us identifying as anything other than human is a little bit off kilter. So that takes care of the whole spectrum of color and race. And remember, we have racism and we have colorism, because in some places, and we're a global network, so it's important to remember that this is not just what goes on in the United States. In many parts of the world where they may not identify things as problematic from a racial standpoint, people who are have various shades of skin color sometimes get treated differently. With the lighter you are, the brighter you are, and the darker you are, the more likely that you are to be on the receiving end of some what we call daily indignities. In addition to those categories, we need to be cognizant that everyone does not identify as heterosexual. There's a huge span of how people identify across this particular category. And what I'd like to say is that many people call it sexual preference. I don't really look at it as sexual preference. I teach people that there are many complexities around this. For one thing, there is gender identity. When we're born, we are given a gender identity. However, there are many people who later on in life do not align with, or their experience is not lined up with the gender identity that they were given at birth. And it can create a lot of pain and suffering for people. So we have gender identity, and we have within that, we have people who are identified as binary or non-binary. Binary, I identify as a woman. So as a woman, my pronouns are she, her, hers. That's because I identify as a woman. Someone who is non-binary recognizes that they were born with what they feel is equal parts male and female. And so they identify as they, them, theirs, because they're honoring their masculine and their feminine in their creation of their person. People get really freaked out about that sometimes, and it's very sad because it's a learning curve. It's just something that we have to learn to negotiate. I have an offspring, so listen to my language. I have an offspring formerly identified as my daughter, and she identifies as non-binary. So when we're having conversations, I will say, baby girl, what are you up to? And then I'll catch myself and I'll say, sweetheart, I'm sorry. And she'll say, Mom, look, I'm always going to be baby girl to you. You're my mother. You can call me whatever you want to call me, and you earn the right to call me baby girl because I got 9 months of free rent. And so we just laugh about that, and we understand that there's no way that you can just automatically make the shift. So it's about having the grace to honor how people identify and to learn about it and to ask them to be patient with you.